Life.Church created this podcast because we all need healthy conversations with real people. So this podcast is here to help you start conversations with your life group, friends, and family. Now, on to the show.
Welcome to the You've Heard It Said podcast. This is Jason.
And this is Allie.
And I hate naps. Like short ones are not long enough. Long ones make you feel like a zombie.
Yes.
All of them feel like I'm missing out. Like maybe you're a nap person, maybe you're not. My mom takes these naps that she calls a 10-minute, and they're actually like famous in our family. My kids were actually building a Lego RV, and they're like, this is grandma in the back. She's taking one of her 10 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
But no, I hate naps.
I love that they built an actual Lego thing to show that she takes naps. But I am with you. I hate naps. Like when I wake up, I am always so disoriented and so confused, and I always panic. And one time I took this 2-hour nap and I started crying when I woke up because I was so mad that I'd been asleep that long. But like, I think it's not just naps. I think it's just like rest in general. I'm not that much into it.
Yeah. And we've just had this whole, I keep saying the word season, but like these weird months of our life where rest would have been a great way to use all the extra time. And instead I saw people, including myself, making new gardens, learning to bake bread, working more, working out more, which is good, and finding just about like every way possible to use the extra time except rest. I even found myself writing some poetry. At one point.
Really? Poetry?
Yeah, it was more like a rant about things like rest that had some rhyming into it. And I'm actually going to maybe play it for us later, possibly.
I think you should. But do you want to introduce our next guest?
Yes. So Josh Brower, he's a good friend, but he's also this really great leader at Life.Church. And we'll let him tell you a little bit more about that.
So what I do at Life.Church is oversee several operational teams at all of our campuses. They focus on a good portion of our volunteer expression. So there's thousands of volunteers in our operations and our guest experience. And I also focus on some of our analytics and in our new locations at Life.Church. So kind of a hodgepodge of a bunch of different things. I get to work with great leaders who lead all those departments. So it's a blast.
So how'd you end up in leadership at Life.Church?
Yeah, so I'll make a really long story really short. I actually started ministry in 97.
Okay, that's when Allie was born.
Right.
95,
Right.
No. Give me credit.
Great. No. So I was youth and worship pastor, and most of my life I've been in ministry, and at Life.Church I've been on a team for 13 years. I started in 2007 at our Albany, New York campus when we launched it. So I was the launching campus pastor of that.
Okay.
So that's my journey in ministry, but also at Life.Church as well.
So would you tell me, what are some of the things that you just love about your work?
Yeah, that's a great question. Many years ago, we rolled out something called the Kazone Experience at Life.Church campuses, and I was part of the beta test. Kazone just means vision. It's a Hebrew word for vision based on a book Pastor Craig had written. And in this experience, we were all discovering what our vision is. Like, can we write a vision statement? And I had vision statement envy because mine came out really simple compared to others, and it was just helping others succeed. After I got over the envy, I just embraced it, honestly, because I love it. If I can help others succeed, I feel successful. So I don't need to do anything myself, just helping others do it. And I've just found a joy in ministry doing that.
So I'm just curious, has your connection to that meaning in work ever gotten in the way of your family or gotten in the way of rest?
Yeah, back when I was a pastor of our Albany location, it was late 2007, and my daughter was born on a Saturday.
Okay.
Right? Oh. Now, we have Saturday and Sunday services.
Yeah.
And so I just thought, man, like, she's born on a Saturday. Well, I can still leave my church this weekend, right? Yes. My wife wasn't really like upset about it. Believe it or not, because I was actually bringing my son into Life Kids, and she didn't want me and my son hanging out the whole time in the hospital room. But there's a sensitivity and an understanding that that I had to realize that not everything is dependent on me. And my boss at the time called me out. I remember that conversation clearly. And then he started asking me things like, when's the last time you took time off? When's the last time you took vacation? And I did not have very good answers for those questions. And I started really searching about my own priorities and in that area.
So what do you think it was that made it so difficult for you to take time off?
Have you ever heard the phrase, do something you love and you'll never have to work again?
Yeah.
That's it. It's like, well, I'm not working to begin with because I just love this. And then the second thing is not understanding that just because I love what I do doesn't mean I can't be better at it. And one of the key ways I could get better is by operating more in biblical obedience in terms of rest and understanding what rest really was and how God could use it to form me into something even better than I was at the time.
What I love about the story you just told is that your wife has a baby on the literal Hebrew Sabbath.
Yep. I want to hear it. Go ahead. Take it in.
And then you think it's a good idea to go work at a church on the same day. Okay. The reason we want to talk with you was because of how many times many of us have heard you talk about the Sabbath.
Yeah.
Okay. So help me get from I'm going to work the day I have a new baby to where you're at now. What did you start to realize? What are some of the realizations that you had about Sabbath and rest?
Okay. So I'm one of those people who just, when I want to understand something, I research and read and just like dive in to as much as I can consume about it. So that's where I started, is actually understanding the word Sabbath. Sabbath itself literally just means to pause, to cease and rest. So it's like, okay, I understand that. And then going deeper and understanding, well, actually, originally the institution of Sabbath came way before public gathering of worship in the Old Testament. They were separate types of events.
Okay.
And reading about Sabbath.
So you're separating Sabbath from going to church?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Sabbath came like as early as the creation story, and the gathering of God's people did not come till hundreds, if not thousands of years later. So it was really interesting to me that they're two separate things. Another thing too is honestly reading the 10 Commandments and understanding that, well, adultery is still, today.
Yeah.
Like don't have adultery.
Right.
Like
that's another podcast.
It feels like a duh. Like, you shouldn't cheat on your wife. You shouldn't cheat on your husband, right?
Yeah.
Or you shouldn't lie. Like all these big things. But then like remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. How many times have I done that? How many times have I broken that commandment? And I'm like, well, I should treat that almost as serious, if not as serious as thou shalt not murder.
Yep.
Maybe I should be taking rest in the Sabbath more seriously.
Yeah. So what did you do?
Here's what I would say, and I would say to anyone listening, is like, it doesn't start perfect. It's like the muscle that needs to be exercised and it's built over time. So first it was just like being disciplined to take one day off a week. Just that. I would say I'm more disciplined with it now than I was back then. The things I did back then might have still been work in my own head, honestly. And it just over time I had to learn about what work was and what it was not, and what a healthy Sabbath for me was, which I do think is nuanced with everyone, honestly.
So you don't think that we rest all the same?
I don't. A coworker of mine, we've been working together for many years, finds a lot of rest in going to the gym. I don't at all. Right?
I'm with you.
For me, it's not a physical rest thing. It's actually a mental rest. My mind is one that just goes and goes and goes. Ideas, thoughts. I want to consume information. I love it. And to a point where I need help shutting my mind off. I have no problem not doing a lot of physical activity. Some people, it's the opposite. Maybe someone actually works in the field where they're very physical, construction work, something like that. And maybe their Sabbath will look different. Maybe it's actually more about intellectual stimulation and less physical stimulation. But to me, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Well, holy just means separate, different. So keeping the Sabbath that day different from what my normal week looked like meant stimulating my mind in different ways. Reading something that had nothing to do with ministry or work, maybe out of pleasure, listening to a podcast, maybe like intellectual stimulation in a different arena.
Yeah.
I love to travel. I love different cultures, doing things that were healthy and builds me as a person and even my internal character, but wasn't necessarily directly connected to work.
Yeah. So I heard you say Sabbath means pause, cease, rest. And what I think is cool about your story is like you said the first thing I had to do was just get consistent about taking a day off.
Yeah.
It's like you've pressed pause. I always thought Sabbath meant Saturday. Like, is that a myth we can clear up?
I think the myth is where we confuse it with a day of worship. So we think Hebrew Shabbat might be that sundown Friday to sundown Saturday, or Christians, most of them go to church on Sunday, so that's Sabbath. And I think one of the best concepts that helped me better display and honor the Sabbath in my own life and for God was to separate the two concepts, that public gathering of worship is a separate concept from getting the rest that God has called me towards. And I say calling with a very intentional use of that word.
Yeah. So you pointed out that idea of keeping it holy as like keeping it separate from your work, from the normal things you do. How do you keep your Sabbath holy? Like, give us an example.
That's great. That's the real practical stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm super disciplined to do things like turn off notifications on my phone. Unless it's like an emergency, there's no reason I need to be contacted. And also put the control of information into my own hands. If it's an emergency, someone's going to call me. Yeah. Right? But if it's not an emergency, I can choose when I want to read that email. Yeah. Right? I can choose when to engage my mind in work or when not to. And I believe there are exceptions to the rule. I mean, Jesus healed on the Sabbath, right? Now, that's a whole different intellectual and theological thing because Jesus was Lord of the Sabbath. But then you actually watch his life and he had his rest rhythms. I mean, just read and picture it in your mind and watch it play out. When he does ministry with lots of crowds and all this, watch how many times it says Jesus withdrew and was alone. Jesus withdrew and prayed. He withdrew. Disciples got frustrated.
Yeah. They're always looking for him.
He? You know?
He's on the bottom of the boat.
And he knew what his own rest rhythms were, being fully God, but fully man as well. He knew that he had his own rest rhythms, but they might have not been the traditional Sabbath, but they certainly were his Sabbath. Yeah. You know?
That's good. One of the things that I heard you say earlier that I thought was helpful is you compared Sabbath to exercise and how it's something you have to work at. And so I'm also wondering, like, when I exercise, I have this expectation that I'm immediately going to get fit. So if you practice Sabbath, am I immediately going to stop feeling stressed out or anxious?
Like, is that how it worked for you? Like,
no, it's not. I wish it was like a magic button, but I think in Christianity, there's a lot of things we wish were like that, right? It's not, and it's not easy. In fact, I would say your spiritual enemy does not want you to do this. It will be difficult. You have to consistently set boundaries, consistently talk about those boundaries with others, your friends and your coworkers, so they understand them, and then not beat yourself up when sometimes those boundaries are crossed. Just go back and learn from it and say, how can I shore this up so it's not crossing a boundary? Like, I don't have to have notifications. I can actually control the flow of information. Now, I have to be more disciplined about being informed when I am on that way, but I also get a more fulfilling and God-honoring Sabbath when I do as well. It's constant tweaking, it's constant learning, and it's constant growing, similar to any other discipline that we would choose to want to get better at. You know, I relaxed some of those disciplines, and I started to honestly believe I'm not needed at work, and everybody could do it without me, that type of thing. But the other thing, too, is the importance of sleep. Yeah. We kind of know in a lot of societies that eating right and exercising, they're really important to our health. But the third leg of the stool is sleep. And I started to lose a lot of sleep. I don't know what came first, like hyperanxiety, depression, lack of sleep, but it all feeds into each other and becomes a snowball rolling down a mountain. And there was a period of time where I was sleeping 1-2 hours on average a night. Yeah. And that just becomes extremely unhealthy.
What perspective change happened that brought you out of that time?
This is where it wraps back down to this command of rest. All the way back to creation day number 6. Like, God's pretty clear with man that he's created this beautiful earth and this garden and planted man there, and we're there to work it and steward it. And like, there's all this activity. And then he says, the first thing I want you to do is just be, though. Don't do. Rest. If I'm Adam, I'm like, I haven't done anything yet. Why do I need to rest? Right? You just did all the work.
Yeah. Man shows up and then it's like, take a day off.
Right? Who I am is more important than what I do, and what I do flows out of that. I think it's interesting that when God reveals his name to Moses for the first time we hear it, he says, I am, which the transliteration is Yahweh. God even shows you he is before he does. In the priority of I am before I do, God has called me to be, and out of who I am and who he's called me to be, then I do. That priority, it changed my anxiety and depression. Not that I don't struggle with those things, honestly, but it's the same concept. It's not about me. The world's not going to fall apart if I don't do, and I can actually do better if I'm prioritizing being first.
So you were looking for meaning in the things that you were doing. And even though you had Sabbath in order, your mind was not there. It had this perspective of doing before being. So you needed that body, mind, and spirit rest.
Absolutely.
And that made the difference.
Absolutely.
Okay, big question. What would your life look like today if you had never figured out how to rest in Sabbath?
I don't think my marriage would be half as healthy as it is, nor my relationship with my kids. I don't think my leadership at church would be half as effective as it is. I think I'm a better leader. I think I serve people better that way because it's not about me, right? It would be drastically different in all realms of my life.
I thought you might say that. And so we just wanted to check to see if it's true. So we asked Heather, your wife.
Oh, no. Oh, my goodness. You guys are so sneaky. Oh, whoa.
Hi, Josh. It's me. Surprise. So I just wanted to let you know that since you have become really more intentional, especially in these last few years, about rest and about working when you work and disconnecting when you need to, it has made a huge difference in our home. You are a better husband and a better dad, and you're a better friend because we get more of you when you're with us. You're more in the moment, for lack of a better way of phrasing it, but you really are. You're more with us when you're with us. You're not thinking about, oh, what else can I get done today, or what else might I think about today? You're just tangibly present with us. And I just thank you so much for taking it seriously because we love you and we want to be with you. And I love you. And it has meant a lot to me. Thank you.
So everyone listening can't see you right now.
That's right. I've just got tears going right now. A lot of times in life, we want these huge changes because huge changes you can see, but it's the hard incremental work that you don't see until you look back and realize how far you've come and realize that God had done a work and is still doing that work. And those little incremental changes over time are way bigger than that one big crying at the altar moment.
That's good. So I'm wondering, if everybody rests a little bit differently, how do we know if rest is rest?
What are the ingredients that can't change?
I think from a biblical perspective, it has to have the element of pause, cease, rest. So, and it has to have the element of set apart. Remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. And the funny thing is, even in the Hebrew, that word remember, it's a pattern. It means keep doing this pause, cease, and rest, and keep it separate from the other days. It's really important. But even broader than that, understanding that sometimes we need to take periods of rest. So the word vacation comes to mind, right? And the way I take a vacation is going to be different from the way you take a vacation. The point is that everybody needs to take a break. It's like everybody needs that day. That's very clear in the Bible. And then the nuances are how you steward that day and manage that day. And same thing with the longer vacations, the breaks, things like that. How do you tailor them to you? And how do they work for you and your family too? But the non-negotiables almost is what you're asking. Whatever your work is, almost like a genre or the type of work you do, pause that. If you're, a knowledge worker, don't do that knowledge work on that day off. If you're in construction, don't go build someone else's house on your day off.
Someone needs to hear that right now.
Right. It's true.
It's important.
And that disruption in the week is what God wants to use to speak.
Hi, I'm Tim. I'm a pastor and sourdough baker from the San Francisco Bay Area. Work-life balance is something we all need to learn, and it's certainly true for pastors. Back in the 90s, I was newly married in college and living up near Seattle. My wife and I walked into Grand Central Bakery, an artisan sourdough bread bakery, and I was arrested by the beauty of the loaves. They have an orangey-like hue, like they're shining from the inside. It's called bloom, and the smell is just amazing. Something inside my heart woke up. I felt like I'd rediscovered something great that had been there all along. I looked at my wife and I said to her, I want to work here. It was the beginning of a lifelong hobby and a pursuit of great bread. Before commercial yeast was invented in the 19th century, all bread was sourdough. It's a simple, natural fermentation process that adds flavor and lightness to the bread. Good sourdough isn't dominated by sourness. It's sweet, tangy, nutty. It's a bouquet of flavor. If you don't like sourdough, probably the supermarket bread you've tried isn't real sourdough. Lots of bread sold as sourdough is just flavored with vinegar. All bread would be made with the sourdough process if it wasn't for one thing: time. Time is expensive. Sourdough takes 2 to 3 days instead of 2 to 3 hours to bake. And bakeries have figured out how to use yeast and dough conditioners to produce bread that's predictable, fast, and shelf stable. But that bread can't match the flavor, texture, and crust of real sourdough. It's an entirely different thing. Good things take time, right? But there's more than that. There's a specific part of this sourdough process that's a metaphor for living life to the fullest. To make sourdough bread, you mix together the starter, flour, water, and salt, just 4 ingredients, and then you knead the dough. You let it rise, you shape the dough, you let it rise again, then you bake the loaves. But there's an in-between step. And if you do this in-between step, your dough will be resilient. Your bread will rise higher, have a richer color, and better flavor and texture. Raymond Calville, a revered French baker, discovered this in the 70s, that if you cut back on the amount of working or kneading the dough and instead give it about a 20-minute rest before the first rise, it greatly improves the outcome of the loaf. If you only knead the dough without resting it in between, it requires more kneading and still can't form as many gluten bonds, which trap the CO2 to make the bread rise. So you add this rest, and it's like, at a point, work plus rest accomplishes more than work alone. Another way of saying it is that the dough matures faster and better if it's allowed to rest between the work. Adding rest to the recipe actually increases the efficiency of the rise. Do you need to give yourself permission to rest? You can rise higher if you add rest to your work.
So if we want to rise strong, we need to rest. I like that.
Me too.
And I think I want to learn to bake sourdough.
Okay, so baking and poetry.
Well, I mean, the thing I wrote I didn't set out to write a poem. I was trying to figure out why it's so hard for me to rest. I started writing, and then I knew we were going to do this episode, so I recorded it. But I guess, yeah.
Okay, well, I want to hear it.
Okay. Do you think like me? Do you think of rest as the sign of the week, like it's something boring people do? Or maybe you and I will do it too, like one day, when our bodies, hearts, and minds are so tired they've somehow messed up the rest of our life. The rest of our life. Isn't it interesting that when we refer to what's left of something whole, we call that space the rest of our life? What is outer space? The rest of the universe. What is left on your plate when you've eaten enough? The rest of your lunch. And how much of our natural resources, clean air, water, and energy are left in our earth? The rest. And sometimes even the rest isn't enough for ourselves if we only always use up what's left. And why do most of us never stop to rest before the rest is the only thing that's left? Okay, Jason, let it rest. Maybe this is why Benjamin Franklin, one of the people who built my nation, said, "He that can take rest is greater than he that can take cities." I guess I should stop filling up my vacation so full of activities. Thanks, Benjamin. So, is rest weakness? Is rest one of God's pities on the kind of people who whine when life's too hard? Or is rest somehow something that makes us whole? Rest makes bread rise. Rest brings winter's death to life. Even Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood says rest is best. But even that wise little cat only says that when he's sick. Is rest just what's left at the end of yourself? Okay, take 3 deep breaths. No, really, please do it. You can keep breathing deep if you want. Genesis 2:7. Then the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. Genesis 2:1-3. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. By the 7th day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the 7th day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the 7th day and made it holy, because on it, he had rested from all the work of creating that he had done. Then, in Matthew 11:26-30, Jesus tells the rest of the story. No one knows the Son the way the Father does, nor the Father the way the Son does. But I'm not keeping it to myself. I'm ready to go over it line by line with anyone willing to listen. Okay, this is me talking, not Jesus. Are you willing to listen to what Jesus is about to say? Okay, Jesus goes on. Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me and watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. Okay, Jesus. I want that, the rest of my life.
That was really beautiful. You should write poetry more often. I regret kind of dogging you earlier.
I guess we'll see. But I think the thing that really came out as I was writing that I didn't expect was like how we tend to try to fill the voids of rest with other stuff like consumption or control. And as I'm thinking about it, it's like we're trying to replace God with that stuff.
That'll preach. Okay. I was listening to Tim Keller the other day, and he was talking about how rest is really about trust. And I thought that was really interesting because when we rest, we're remembering that we're not in control, but that God is. And I think that this year especially, we've kind of all collectively realized how little we actually do have control over our lives.
Yep.
Like, I think it's easy to think that we do control a lot more. And then things like COVID happen and it's like, oh, wow, I am actually really not in control here. And that's really stressful. And so I think the temptation is to kind of do what we talked about earlier, like fill the time or fill the Instagram feed or fill the Amazon cart and just do what you said, like replace our time with God with stuff and with our efforts and like manufacturing work. And I think that maybe what I'm hearing us say is that we need to just take time to pause. But what I'm still trying to process is that doesn't feel normal. And so I guess my other question is, what can we do to make rest not feel like something else we have to work at?
I totally identify with that, Allie. In fact, in addition to COVID-19, our recent raised awareness of racial injustice, like I haven't felt like it's okay for me to rest. Like I need to constantly be doing or saying something. And I think this idea of rest and why Jesus calls it a light burden is because of the realization that it's God who is actually doing the heavy lifting and the work. Like, yes, we partner in the work, but we can take a day off. We can pause for a minute or an hour or longer because it's God who is the one who's at work in us and in our world. And so, we need to practice rest. We need to plan on it. We need to be purposeful. But even in that, like we can't be the ones that are even making the rest thing work for us. We have to trust God with that too.
That's really good. I think that was helpful hearing you say it that way, because for me, sometimes I can put a lot of rules on it. So it's almost like, okay, I need to rest. Here's all the rules that I need to put on it. But I think what you've said, and also what we heard from Josh earlier, is helping me remember that a healthier understanding of rest is recognizing that it is about trusting God. And so trusting God in that time of rest too. And just remembering that it's not optional, like rest is required, and that it's not just a reward for our work, but it actually does help our work. And so the two go together, and that resting almost resets us.
I think we get in trouble when we think of rest as giving ourselves permission to do nothing. It's actually giving God permission to do everything.
Okay.
And so if you can't take 1 minute where you're actually doing nothing and you're just looking around and reflecting and thanking God for the things you see, then you're probably living as if you're the one who does everything. And you're not. So this week, each day, take a minute, pause, look around, be grateful. Also, take a day, have a Sabbath. And like Josh said, that's taking a break, a pause, a cease and a rest from your normal genre of work. And then talk about it with your friends, talk about it with your life group, and just see what God does.
Thanks so much for listening to the You've Heard It Said podcast. We hope that what you've heard will spark a conversation with the people you care about. To help you with that, we've got questions, resources, and more in the conversation guide. Find it in the show notes wherever you're listening. Also, if you've enjoyed this conversation, please take a second to leave a rating and review. We know everybody asks you to do that, but it really does make a difference and help more people find the podcast.